3 weeks before my sister's wedding, my parents told me they had spent their entire savings making her perfect day. I smiled and stayed quiet, because I knew something they didn't. The venue, the dress, and almost every major expense had been paid for with money I had been saving for years. The first time my mother called my sister's wedding the most important day of her life, I was standing in the middle of a bridal boutique, holding a dress that cost more than my first car. Claire was in the fitting room. My mother stood beside me with her arms folded, watching the saleswoman explain the alterations. "It's perfect," Mom said. I looked at the price tag. "It's $8,000. Mom barely glanced at it. "So?" I looked at her. "So, that's a lot of money." She gave me the same look she'd been giving me since I was a child, whenever she thought I was being difficult. "Your sister only gets married once." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because I had heard that sentence so many times over the previous year that it had stopped meaning anything. Claire only gets married once. Claire deserves the best. Claire has waited for this. Claire shouldn't have to worry about money. Every conversation somehow came back to Claire. And every time it did, I quietly reached for my wallet. I was 31 years old. Claire was 27. She was younger, prettier, more outgoing, and, according to my mother, far more deserving of a celebration. I didn't resent Claire for that. At least, I didn't think I did. What hurt was that nobody seemed to notice what I was doing behind the scenes. When Claire's wedding venue deposit was due, I paid it. When the florist raised its prices, I covered the difference. When the photographer demanded a larger booking fee, I transferred the money. When my mother said the wedding cake Claire wanted was ridiculously expensive, I paid the baker directly. And when Claire wanted that $8,000 dress, I paid for that too. But nobody knew, not my parents, not Claire, not even my fiancé, Ethan. Because I had promised myself that I wouldn't tell anyone. I wasn't doing it for praise. I wasn't doing it so Claire would owe me. I was doing it because she was my sister. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. The saleswoman smiled. "Would you like to put the dress on hold?" My mother answered before I could. "Yes." I handed over my card. Claire came out of the dressing room, wearing the dress. She looked beautiful. She stood in front of the mirror with tears in her eyes. "Mom?" My mother immediately hugged her. "You look like a princess." Claire looked at herself. Then, at me. "What do you think?" I smiled. "You look amazing." She hugged me. "Thank you." I hugged her back, and for a moment, everything felt worth it. Then Claire whispered something. "I can't believe Mom and Dad are doing all this for me." I pulled back slightly. "What do you mean?" She smiled. "They told me they were using their savings." I froze. "They did?" "Yeah." She looked toward Mom. "They said they wanted to give me the wedding they never had." I looked at my mother. She was smiling proudly. And suddenly, I felt something cold settle in my chest. Because that wasn't true. My parents hadn't paid for most of this. I had. But I said nothing. I simply smiled. "I'm happy for you." That evening, I went home and opened the spreadsheet on my laptop. It was the one I had been keeping for almost 2 years. Every payment. Every transfer. Every vendor. Every receipt. I stared at the total. $47,860. Almost $48,000. That was how much I had spent on Claire's wedding. Money I had saved for years. Money I had originally planned to use as a down payment on a house. Ethan knew I had been saving. He knew I'd postponed buying a home. He thought it was because I wanted to wait until after the wedding. He had no idea why. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep the secret. My family had always been complicated. Claire was the favorite. Nobody ever said it out loud. They didn't have to. It was obvious in small ways. When we were children, Claire got the bigger bedroom because she was more sensitive. When she wanted piano lessons, Mom found the money. When I wanted guitar lessons, I was told to teach myself through videos. When Claire failed her first year of college, Dad said she was under pressure. When I nearly failed a semester because I was working 2 jobs, Dad told me I needed better discipline. I learned early that complaining didn't change anything. So I became independent. I worked, I saved, I solved my own problems. And because I rarely asked for help, my family eventually assumed I didn't need any. Claire wasn't like that. She asked, and they gave. Sometimes I envied her. Sometimes I admired her. Sometimes I resented her. Mostly I loved her. That was what made everything so difficult. When she announced her engagement to Ryan, she called me first. I remember sitting on my kitchen floor because I'd just gotten home from work. She was crying so hard, I could barely understand her. "I'm getting married." I laughed. "You're 27, Claire, you can get married." "No, I mean Ryan proposed." I screamed. She screamed. Then, we both cried. For the first time in years, I felt like we were little girls again. She told me everything. The ring. The proposal. The restaurant. The way Ryan had gotten down on one knee. I was genuinely happy. Then she said, "I don't know how we're going to afford the wedding." I asked how much they had saved. "About $12,000. I knew immediately it wouldn't be enough. Claire wanted a large wedding. 200 guests. A historic venue. A live band. Professional photography. A designer dress. A huge floral installation. She wasn't trying to be extravagant. She simply had a very specific picture in her head. And every time she described it, I could see how badly she wanted it. So, I offered to help. "Let me handle the venue deposit." She laughed. "No. I'm serious. You're saving for a house. I can wait." "Emma." "Claire." She stared at me. Then she hugged me. "I don't know what I'd do without you." I smiled. "Probably have a smaller wedding." She laughed. Neither of us knew that sentence would become important later. The first payment was only $6,500. Then came another, then another. The problem was that every time I paid one bill, another appeared. The venue wanted additional insurance. The florist needed a deposit. The caterer changed its pricing. The band required transportation. The dress needed alterations. The photographer wanted a second shooter. The list never ended. I could have stopped. I should have stopped. But every time I thought about telling Claire we had to cut something, I imagined her disappointment. So, I kept paying. Eventually, my parents became involved. They told Claire they would take care of everything. I knew what that meant. They expected me to continue doing it quietly. And they weren't even aware they were depending on me. My father had retired 6 months earlier. My mother worked part-time. They had some savings, but not enough to fund the wedding they were promising. I knew that. They didn't. Or maybe they knew, and didn't want to admit it. One night, I asked Dad directly, "How much are you planning to spend on the wedding?" He looked at me. "Why?" "I'm just asking." "Don't worry about it." "I think you should worry about it." He sighed. "Your mother and I have this handled." "Dad, Emma, your sister is getting married." "I know. It's one of the biggest days of her life." "I know. We're not going to let money ruin it." I looked at him. "You shouldn't spend money you don't have." He smiled. "That's why we have credit." I didn't laugh. That was when I realized something. They weren't just celebrating Claire. They were competing with an imaginary standard. They wanted relatives to see a beautiful wedding. They wanted neighbors to talk about it. They wanted everyone to think they had given their daughter the perfect life. And somehow, I was the invisible person, making that image possible. 3 months before the wedding, I started having doubts. Not about Claire, about myself. I opened my savings account one morning, and saw how much money I had left. $19,400. That number terrified me. 2 years earlier, I had almost $70,000. I had worked overtime. I had skipped vacations. I had lived in a tiny apartment. I had driven an old car. I had done everything I could to save for a home. And now, most of it was gone. I sat at my desk, staring at the screen. Ethan walked in. He noticed my expression. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." He looked at the laptop. "Is that your savings?" I closed it. "Yeah. Everything okay?" I nodded. But he didn't believe me. "Emma," I looked at him. "I've been spending more than I planned on the wedding." "How much?" I didn't answer. He sat beside me. How much? Almost 48,000. He stared at me. What? I know, Emma. That's almost your entire down payment. I know. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew you'd tell me to stop. I would have. I know. He looked hurt. You don't trust me. I swallowed. That's not it. Then what is it? I stared at the floor. I didn't want to be the person who ruined my sister's wedding. Ethan was silent. Then he said something that stayed with me. You're not responsible for making everyone else's dreams affordable. I looked at him. I know. No, I don't think you do. I didn't answer, because deep down, I knew he was right. But knowing something and being ready to accept it are different things. 2 weeks later, something happened that changed the way I saw my family. I overheard my mother talking to Claire. They were in the kitchen. I had just walked in through the back door. I heard Mom say, "Don't worry about the final payment. Your father and I will handle it." Claire sighed. "I don't want you two to go into debt. You're our daughter. But you already spent so much." My mother laughed. "That's what parents do." I stood in the hallway. She didn't know I was there. Neither did Claire. And for some reason, I suddenly felt invisible. Not because they were lying, because they believed their own lie. They genuinely thought they were the ones making this happen. I walked away before they saw me. That night, I made a decision. I was done. I would pay the remaining essential bills. But, after the wedding, I wouldn't pay another dollar. I wasn't angry. I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I simply couldn't keep sacrificing my future for a celebration that everyone else believed they had funded. Then came the rehearsal dinner. It was held at an expensive restaurant. My parents had invited 30 relatives. The atmosphere was cheerful. Everyone was congratulating Claire. People kept telling my parents how generous they were. "You two really went all out." My mother smiled. "We just wanted to make it special." I sat at the end of the table. Nobody mentioned me. Then Aunt Linda raised her glass. "To the parents who gave their daughter everything." Everyone clapped. I stared at my glass. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Claire looked at me. She noticed. After dinner, she followed me outside. "You okay?" "Yeah." "You look upset." "I'm tired." She hugged me. "I can't wait for tomorrow." "Me neither." She smiled. "You know you're the reason this is all happening, right?" My heart tightened. "What do you mean?" "You've been amazing through all of this." I smiled. "You're my sister." She kissed my cheek. Then she went back inside. I stood outside alone. And I realized something. Maybe she knew more than I thought. Maybe she had always known. The wedding day arrived. The venue looked beautiful. White flowers, candles, long tables, gold accents. Everything Claire had imagined. I watched her walk down the aisle. Ryan was crying. My mother was crying. My father was crying. I cried too. Because despite everything, I loved her. At the reception, Claire gave a speech. She thanked Ryan. She thanked her friends. Then she thanked my parents. I wouldn't be standing here without them. Everyone applauded. I looked at Mom. She looked proud. Then Claire looked at me. "And my sister Emma." The room quieted. Claire smiled. "She has been there for me through every single part of this." My throat tightened. I don't know how to repay her. I shook my head. "You don't have to." She continued. "She kept telling me this was my day." People laughed softly. But she was wrong. Claire looked at me. "This day belongs to everyone who loved me enough to make it possible." My eyes filled with tears. I thought she was going to tell everyone. She didn't. Instead, she hugged me. And the speech ended. For a few hours, everything was beautiful. Then, the final bill arrived. And that was when the truth finally started to surface. The venue manager approached my father. "Mr. Harris?" Dad turned. "Yes? We just need to confirm the final payment." Dad nodded. "Of course." The manager handed him a folder. Dad opened it. His face changed. "What is this?" The manager looked confused. "The payment history." I thought everything was paid. It is. Dad stared at the page. By who? The manager looked at the paperwork. Emma Harris. My father's head snapped toward me. I was standing across the room. Mom came over. What happened? Dad handed her the folder. She read it, then looked at me. I knew immediately. The secret was over. She walked toward me. Emma. I looked at her. What? She held up the folder. Why does your name appear on the payment records? I didn't answer. Claire walked over. What happened? Mom looked at her. Your sister paid the venue. Claire looked confused. What? Dad spoke quietly. Not just the venue. He flipped through the pages. The florist. Another page. The photographer. Another. The catering deposit. Another. The dress. Claire stared at me. Emma? I finally said it. I paid for it. She looked like she'd been slapped. What? Most of it. How much? I hesitated. Dad answered. Almost $48,000. Claire covered her mouth. The room around us seemed to disappear. My mother stared at me. You spent that much? I nodded. Why didn't you tell us? I looked at her. Because you didn't want me to. That doesn't make sense. It does. My father looked at the documents again. Your mother and I thought we paid for this. I know. We told everyone. I know. His face turned pale. We used our savings for the remaining costs. I looked at him. What do you mean? He didn't answer. Mom did. We sold some investments. I froze. What? We thought the wedding was going to cost much more than it did. Because I paid the bills. She nodded. Tears filled her eyes. We didn't know. Claire was crying now. Emma, why? I looked at her. Because you wanted this. But I didn't ask you to spend $48,000. I know. You should have told me. I should have. She shook her head. I thought Mom and Dad were doing this. I know. Why did you let us believe that? That question hurt. Because I didn't have a good answer. I wanted you to have your day. Claire looked at me. And, what about you? I didn't answer. She started crying harder. What about your life? I looked away. Nobody had asked me that before. Not once. The wedding continued. But emotionally, it had ended for me. I went outside. I sat on a bench near the parking lot. A few minutes later, Claire came out. She sat beside me. Neither of us spoke. Finally, she said, I feel horrible. You don't have to. Yes, I do. You didn't know. But I should have. No. I should have asked. I looked at her. You were getting married. That doesn't excuse it. No. She nodded. I thought Mom and Dad were paying. I know. Were they pretending? I don't think so. She looked at me. What do you mean? I think they wanted to be the parents who could give you everything. Claire wiped her tears. They couldn't. No. And you could? I laughed softly. Apparently. She didn't smile. That's not funny. I know. She leaned back. Why didn't you stop? I thought about that. Because every time I tried, I imagined disappointing you. She looked at me. I would have understood. Maybe. You don't believe me. I believe you now. She was silent. Then she said, I don't want a wedding that costs you your future. I looked at her. It already happened. She cried again. I didn't. I had already spent enough tears on that decision. The next morning, my parents came to my apartment. All three of them. My father, my mother, Claire. Ethan opened the door. When he saw them, he looked at me. I nodded. He let them in. We sat around the dining table. My father put a check on the table. It was for $25,000. I stared at it. What's this? Repayment. I shook my head. I don't want it. Emma, I don't want the money. Why? Because if I take it, I don't want this to become a transaction. My mother started crying. It isn't. Then don't put a price on it. Claire reached for the check. I'll pay you. I stopped her. No. Emma, no. She looked at me. You gave me this wedding. I gave you help. You gave me your savings. I made a choice. You made a choice because you love me. Yes. Then let me make one too. She pushed the check back toward me. I'll pay you back. I stared at her. How? Slowly. I almost smiled. You'll be paying me for years. I know. Your studio? I'll work. I looked at her. And for the first time, I saw something different. Not the younger sister, who always expected someone to save her. An adult woman, who understood that love didn't cancel responsibility. I nodded. Okay. She smiled through her tears. Okay. My parents were harder. Because they had to confront something deeper. They had spent years telling themselves they were fair parents. They weren't. My mother finally admitted it. I think I confused your independence with not needing us. I looked at her. That hurt. I know. I needed you too. She nodded. I know now. My father looked at me. I was proud of you for being strong. I smiled sadly. Sometimes, I didn't want to be strong. He lowered his head. I wish you had told me. I tried. He looked at me. I reminded him of the guitar lessons, the college tuition, the apartment, the times I had asked for help and been told I could handle it. He listened. And for the first time, he didn't defend himself. He simply said, I was wrong. Those 3 words were worth more than the check. The months after the wedding were uncomfortable. There was no magical transformation. Claire started sending me money every month. Not much, but consistently. She also stopped asking our parents for financial help. My mother started asking me questions, not about money, about my life, my job, my relationship, my plans, my house. At first, it felt strange. Then it became normal. 6 months after the wedding, Ethan and I bought a small house. It wasn't the dream house I'd once imagined. It had an uneven backyard and an ugly kitchen. The living room was too narrow. The garage door made a terrible noise. But when I stood in the empty living room holding the keys, I cried. Because I had almost given up on that moment. Claire came over that weekend. She brought a housewarming gift. It was a framed photograph. I opened it. It was a picture of my new front door. Above it was a small handwritten note. For the home you almost gave up to build someone else's dream. I looked at her. You're getting better at this. She laughed. I've had a good teacher. I hugged her. And that was when I realized our relationship had changed. We were no longer sisters, because one of us needed something from the other. We were sisters, because we chose to be. A year after the wedding, Claire finished repaying me. The final payment was only $400. She handed me the check. I looked at it. You know you didn't have to finish this early. I wanted to. Why? She smiled. Because I don't want you to ever wonder if I understood what you did. I looked at her. I never wondered. You did. I smiled. Maybe. She hugged me. Then she whispered. Thank you. I closed my eyes. For what? For giving me something I didn't know I needed. What? The chance to become responsible. I pulled back. She was crying. So, thank you. I smiled. You're welcome. People sometimes assume the lesson is that family should always sacrifice for one another. I don't believe that anymore. Love isn't measured by how much of yourself you're willing to destroy. You can love someone and still say no. You can support someone without financing their entire life. You can be generous without becoming invisible. And sometimes, the hardest thing isn't giving. It's admitting that you have given too much. For years, I thought being the dependable daughter was something to be proud of. And it was. But I confused being dependable with being responsible for everyone. Those aren't the same thing. My family didn't become better because they discovered who had paid for the wedding. They became better because they finally understood the cost of taking someone's strength for granted. And I became better because I stopped hiding my needs behind generosity. 3 years after Claire's wedding, my mother hosted Thanksgiving. The whole family was there. Claire brought Ryan. Daniel brought his new girlfriend. My father cooked the turkey. My mother complained that nobody was helping enough. It felt strangely normal. At dinner, Mom stood up. She raised her glass. To family. Everyone lifted their glasses. Then she looked at me, and to learning that love isn't supposed to be measured by who pays the bill. Everyone laughed. I did too. But my mother wasn't finished. To Emma. I shook my head. She smiled. You don't get to stop me. Everyone laughed again. She continued. For years, I thought being a good mother meant making sure my children had everything they wanted. She looked around the table. I was wrong. Then she looked at me. Sometimes being a good mother means noticing when the child who never asks for anything is quietly giving away too much. The room became quiet. I looked down at my plate. I wasn't embarrassed. I wasn't angry. I was grateful, not because she had finally praised me, because she had finally seen me. And sometimes, that's the thing you wanted all along. Not money, not recognition, not an apology, just to be seen. Later that night, I stood outside on the porch with Claire. The air was cold. She handed me a cup of tea. Remember when you paid for my wedding dress? I laughed. Unfortunately, I still feel guilty. You shouldn't. I do. Then feel grateful instead. She smiled. Fair? We stood quietly. Then she said, You know what I remember most about that day? What? You were sitting in the parking lot alone. I looked at her. How did you know? I saw you. I stared at her. You did? She nodded. I saw you through the window. Why didn't you come outside? I was afraid. Of what? That you'd tell me you regretted everything. I thought about that. I did regret some things. She nodded. I know, but not helping you. She looked at me. That matters. I smiled. Just don't make me do it again. She laughed. I won't. Then she leaned her head against my shoulder. And for a few minutes, neither of us said anything. We didn't need to, because sometimes healing doesn't look like a dramatic apology. Sometimes it looks like sitting beside someone you once felt invisible to, and realizing they finally know how much you carried. I still have the original wedding spreadsheet. I never deleted it. Not because I'm keeping score, because it reminds me of who I was. The woman who believed love meant giving until there was nothing left. The woman who thought saying no made her selfish. The woman who could spend nearly $48,000 and still worry that she hadn't done enough. I don't hate that woman. She was trying to love her family the only way she knew how. But I wish I could sit beside her for 5 minutes. I'd tell her something I didn't understand back then. You don't have to disappear to prove that you care. You don't have to sacrifice your future to make someone else's present beautiful. And you don't have to wait until people discover what you've done before you admit that you deserve to be appreciated. My sister's wedding was beautiful. The flowers were beautiful. The dress was beautiful. The photographs were beautiful. But none of those things are what I remember most. I remember the moment my father opened that folder and realized who had actually paid the bills. I remember my mother's face. I remember Claire asking me why I had sacrificed so much. And I remember realizing that for the first time, they were looking at me. Not as the strong daughter, not as the reliable sister, not as the person who would always fix everything. Just me. And maybe that was the gift I got from that wedding. Not gratitude, not repayment, not even forgiveness. It was the realization that I could love my family without losing myself inside them. And these days, whenever someone asks me why I don't make sacrifices the way I used to, I give them the simplest answer I know, because I finally learned that love should add something to your life. It shouldn't require you to disappear from it. If you were in my position, would you have secretly paid for your sister's dream wedding? Or would you have stopped the moment it began costing you your own future?